Hey guys, welcome back to the Red Bed. Tonight, I've got over an hour of real-life Reddit stories to keep you company. It's a good mix of drama, revenge, and interesting situations people deal with. And while you listen, I'll be sharing some hardcore gameplay I got today, where I take my guest on a trip to a floating island and visit my friend at his base. Also, I'm trying to post these videos daily, so if you're enjoying them, consider dropping a sub. But anyways, kick back, relax, and enjoy. This first story is about someone who thought their upstairs neighbor was purposely making noise at 3 a.m. until they found out the real reason behind the ruckus. For weeks, I was convinced my upstairs neighbor was out to ruin my sleep. Like clockwork, every night around 3 a.m., I'd wake up to the sound of rushing water above me. Not just a drip or a faucet running. It sounded like someone was blasting a pressure washer right over my head. It was loud enough to jolt me out of sleep, and once I was awake, it was impossible to drift off again. Now my upstairs neighbor is this big, muscled guy who walks around like he's testing the limits of gravity with each step. His footsteps echo across my ceiling so hard, it sometimes feels like my light fixtures are rattling. In my sleepy, annoyed brain, it all added up perfectly. Of course, this guy was stomping around at night and taking a shower after the gym just to irritate me. I started off subtle. I wrote a sticky note, polite but definitely passive-aggressive, and left it where he'd see it. Something like, "Hey, could you keep the water noise down at night? Thanks." And then, nothing. No response. No change. The 3 a.m. water sounds just kept on coming. So naturally, I escalated. If he was going to be inconsiderate, I could be too. I started vacuuming early in the morning at 6 a.m., when I knew he'd probably be asleep. I played loud, cleaning music, upbeat songs with a thumping beat, while I did chores. I stomped around my own apartment, matching his heavy footsteps whenever I heard them. It became this weird little war. In my head, I started calling it the Cold War of apartment 3B. He'd make noise. I'd retaliate. Neither of us would back down. One night, the water noise started again, louder than ever. I lay there, fuming, staring at the ceiling. Finally, I snapped. I grabbed my broom, marched into the middle of my living room, and jabbed the ceiling with it like some cartoon landlord in an old sitcom. I hit it once, twice, 3 times. The noise stopped immediately. I stood there in the dark, broom in hand, feeling victorious. That's right, I thought. Finally, I showed him. Maybe now he'll think twice about his late-night showers. The next day, though, I noticed a building notice posted near the mailboxes. I almost didn't read it, but the first line caught my eye. "Apologies for the late-night noise." I read on, and my stomach dropped. It explained that the upstairs tenant's iguana, yes, iguana, had been triggering the misting system overnight. Apparently, the automatic timer on the system had malfunctioned, causing it to go off at 3 a.m. every single night. The landlord was working on fixing it. I stood there holding the notice, realizing I hadn't been battling my upstairs neighbor at all. All those early morning vacuuming sessions, the stomping, the broom jabs. I've been waging psychological warfare against a lizard named Pickles. I felt a mix of embarrassment and guilt. So later that day, I went upstairs with some homemade banana bread and an apology. My neighbor opened the door, smiled, and immediately told me about Pickles. Apparently, this iguana was his pride and joy. We ended up talking for a while, and he even showed me some photos. Now, instead of being enemies, we're sort of friends. He gives me little updates on Pickles, and I've started to find the whole situation kind of funny. Pickles still mists at 3 a.m., but now I know what it is. And instead of lying awake angry, I just roll over and think, well, Pickles is at it again. It's weird how something that felt like a battle turned into an unexpected friendship, but that's apartment living for you. That's where the story ends. I love how this turned from a full-on petty war into a funny friendship. It's such a classic case of jumping to conclusions and then realizing the truth was way more harmless. Pickles being the real culprit makes the whole thing even better. Now it's just a hilarious story, instead of an ongoing feud. This next story is about a couple who got tired of pushy solar panel salespeople and decided to mess with one in the most confusing way possible. A few years ago, back when things were already stressful enough, my wife and I started getting constant knocks at the door from solar panel salespeople. It didn't make any sense because we lived in an apartment building. Even if we wanted to, there was no way we could install solar panels. But that didn't stop these folks from showing up day after day, trying to give their pitch. It got annoying fast. One evening, we were in the middle of making dinner and just relaxing with cartoons playing in the background when there was yet another knock on the door. My wife answered it, and standing there was one of the solar sales reps. In a total panic, she didn't want to be rude, so she blurted out the first excuse she could think of. She put on this kind of fake, airy voice and said, "Oh, you'll need to talk to my husband about that. He'll be here tomorrow." Then she shut the door and came back inside, looking guilty. I gave her a look and said, "Wow, thanks for throwing me under the bus." She laughed nervously and said, "I know, I'm sorry. I just panicked. I didn't want to be mean." We both shrugged it off and went back to what we were doing, completely forgetting about it. Then the next day rolled around. It was a Saturday, and we were having a laid-back day at home. I was lounging around in my boxers with messy hair and no shave, hanging out with the dogs. My wife suddenly checked the door camera and said, "Oh no, it's that solar lady from yesterday. I'm so sorry," but I wasn't mad. In fact, I thought, you know what? I've got this. So I ruffled up my shirt a little more to look disheveled, slipped off my wedding ring, and walked into the hall looking like I hadn't seen daylight in weeks. When I opened the door, the saleswoman perked up. "Hi, your wife said—" I cut her off right there and said flatly, "What? My wife died 3 years ago." Her face immediately dropped. "Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry." Trying to recover, she stumbled and said, Your girlfriend then?" I shook my head. "Nope, not dating anyone." Now she was fumbling. Your sister?" Again, I shook my head and said, "Nope, try again." At this point, she looked like she was starting to doubt reality. I don't know. A young lady came out of this door yesterday and told me to talk to her husband about solar panels. I looked her dead in the eye and said, "You must mean the girls that live upstairs." But she shook her head, clearly rattled. No, she definitely came out of this door. So I leaned into it even more. "Wait, what? Did the upstairs girls break into my apartment again? Can you describe her?" Relieved to finally have something to hold on to, she nodded quickly and said, "Yes, she had green hair." I acted confused. "Green hair? Like turquoise? There's a girl down the block with turquoise hair." She cut me off. No, this was just green. Like, straight up green." I tilted my head like I was really thinking about it. "That's strange. The upstairs girls are brunettes. I don't think I even know anyone with green hair." She insisted, but it was here. Yesterday, around 5. She came out of this exact door. I talked to her right here. I sighed, shook my head and said, "I have no idea what you're talking about. I work from home, I'm single, I barely leave the house. I mean, look at me. Do I look like I'm going anywhere?" The poor woman looked completely shaken. She started stammering, I don't know. There was a girl. I swear there was a girl." I leaned in just a little bit and said, "This is really weird. I'm gonna call the landlord and have them pull the cameras. Maybe someone's messing with you. Or maybe someone broke into my place. I mean, I could have been out walking the dogs at that time, but this is really strange." Her face went pale. She looked horrified. I gave her a polite little nod and said, "Anyway, I'm gonna go deal with that now. Have a good day." Then I shut the door. The moment it clicked shut, I turned around and saw my wife, practically doubled over, trying not to laugh too loud. I was grinning too. That poor solar rep had left convinced she'd seen a ghost, or had her memory completely fail her. And honestly, after all the times those salespeople had wasted our evenings knocking on our door for no reason, it felt pretty satisfying to finally waste their time instead. That's the end of this story. That poor saleswoman probably walked away questioning her entire reality after that. The fact that the storyteller kept a straight face the whole time makes it so much funnier. It's the kind of prank that doesn't hurt anyone, but it leaves the other person spinning in circles. And I think the best part is how the wife was just in the background, watching the chaos unfold after setting it all up by accident. This next story is about a teenager who found out her dad wasn't really her biological father, and now her mom is furious that she won't reveal how she found out the truth. I'm 16, and for as long as I can remember, I've noticed something was off with the way my dad treated me compared to my siblings. I've got a sister who's just a little over a year younger than me, and then 2 younger brothers. With them, my dad is all in. He's at every play, every event, cheering them on, buying them little gifts, making them feel special. He's their biggest supporter. But with me, it's like I didn't exist to him. He never came to my recitals. He never showed any interest in the things I was passionate about. When I went to him for comfort, he'd brush me off. And when it came to treats or little surprises, he bought plenty for my siblings, but nothing for me. It went beyond just ignoring me, too. When my mom wasn't home, he'd make plans with my siblings: movie nights, game nights, all that fun family stuff. But I was excluded. Sometimes he'd even push me to go stay at a friend's house or with another relative while they all hung out together. I remember sitting alone in my room, listening to them laugh downstairs, wondering what I'd done to deserve being shut out. I cried to my mom about it more times than I can count. Every time, she'd say it was because we were too much alike and we butted heads. But that explanation never made sense to me. We never really fought. It's not like I gave him attitude or caused drama. I just never got the chance to be close with him in the first place. Then, a couple of months ago, a relative dropped a bombshell. They told me that he isn't actually my dad. My mom had been seeing him and my biological father at the same time. When she got pregnant with me, he made her choose. She chose him, but when the DNA test proved I wasn't his, he said she could keep me, with conditions. He wanted a child of his own right away, and that's why my sister was born so soon after me. The pieces suddenly clicked. The way he treated me differently, the distance, the coldness. It wasn't my imagination. It was intentional, and there was proof to back up what I was told. When I confronted my parents, everything came spilling out. My dad, or I guess I should call him Drake now, since that's what he told me to do, looked me in the eye and said now that I knew, I could stop calling him dad. He admitted he never loved me. He said I wasn't his, and he wanted me out of the house the day I turned 18. He even said he wanted at least 1 year of just his family. My mom's reaction was different, but not in a good way. She wasn't upset about how I'd been treated all these years. She wasn't worried about the fact that I'd basically been disowned by the man I thought was my father. No. What she cared about was finding out who told me. Every single day since then, she's been pestering me, sometimes multiple times a day. Who told you? Which one of our family members said something? She's been pressured by other relatives to finally be honest. So she knows someone spilled, but she doesn't know who, and she wants me to tell her. But I won't. Whoever told me did me a favor. They gave me the truth I needed, even if it hurt. I don't think that makes them a bad person. Honestly, I'm grateful I know now, rather than being blindsided later in life. My mom doesn't see it that way. She says whoever told me was wrong for saying something without her permission, and wrong for making me keep it from her. She even tried to ground me because I refused to give up their name. She told me I was being disrespectful and encouraging dishonesty by protecting them. But I don't care. She's made it clear her priority is protecting her secret, not protecting me. And now, on top of everything else, I've learned that I don't even have a college fund like my siblings do. Drake made sure to set money aside for them, but not for me. So, when I graduate, not only will I have no place to stay, but I'll also have to figure out school and living expenses completely on my own. It's a lot to carry, but no matter how much my mom demands, I'm not going to reveal the person who told me the truth, because at the end of the day, I deserve to know. And even if she thinks it's wrong, it was the only way I was ever going to get answers. That's where this story finishes. This one feels heavy. It's tough hearing about a parent caring more about keeping up appearances than supporting their own kid. The fact that the mom is obsessing over who spilled instead of what was actually revealed says a lot. And honestly, the relative who told the truth probably saved her from years of more confusion. This next story is about a family argument where an aunt kept pushing university as the only path to success until one sharp comeback finally shut her down. So here's the setup. I went to university. Not just any university, but a pretty well-respected one that most people would brag about if they had the chance. I studied hard, graduated with solid results, and on paper it sounds like I did everything right. But here's the reality. After all that effort, after all that money, I was still struggling to land a decent job. The only reason I have the position I do now is because I started as a temp, worked my way in, and eventually they offered me something permanent. And the kicker? It's not even a graduate level job. My sister, on the other hand, didn't go to university. She went straight into working. She's practical, grounded, and she's been earning while I was racking up debt. And honestly, I respect that about her. The problem is, not everyone in the family sees it that way. Now enter my aunt. She's the type who thinks university is the golden ticket to life. She went herself, made good money, carved out a comfortable career in London, and never misses an opportunity to remind people about it. No kids, plenty of time to focus on her career, and in her mind, everyone should take the same route she did. Whenever we see her, and thankfully it's only once or twice a year, the conversation somehow circles back to education. It's almost a game at this point between me and my sister. We'll quietly bet how long it'll take before she drops the first, "So when are you thinking of university?" line. Most of the time, it happens within an hour. It's her favorite topic, and she always steers the discussion that way, no matter what we're talking about. This particular visit was to my grandmother's house. My grandmother had been in the hospital, so we were staying with her to help out a bit. My aunt was there too, which meant sooner or later, the familiar subject was bound to pop up. Sure enough, we weren't even through a casual chat about work before she started in. She asked my sister what she was doing these days. My sister explained her job. Nothing fancy, but she was working steadily and had her own money coming in. My aunt listened, nodded, and then made the comment we both knew was coming. She said, "Well, if you went to university like your sibling did, you could get something much better than that." That was it. That was the moment where I just couldn't take it anymore. Up until then, I had tried to be polite, brushing her off or letting the conversation drift elsewhere. But this time, with everything bottled up, the frustration of years of hearing the same spiel, the weight of my student loans, the disappointment of realizing my degree hadn't opened doors like I was promised, I snapped, but in a calm, matter-of-fact way. I looked right at her and said, "At least she has a job. It took me over a year to even land mine, and it's not even a graduate job. The only reason I have it is because I started as a temp. My degree is useless, and I'm $83,000 in debt." The room went completely quiet. My sister's eyes got wide, and I could tell she was trying not to laugh. My aunt, though, just sat there. She didn't know what to say. For the first time in years, she was completely lost for words. No quick comeback, no lecture about the value of higher education, nothing. It was honestly satisfying, not in a cruel way, but in a release kind of way. I had finally said what I'd been holding in for years. I'd finally laid out, in plain truth, what the actual outcome of my so-called prestigious path had been, and it shut her down immediately. After that, she didn't bring up university again. Not during that visit, and not in any of the times we've seen her since. It's like she finally realized that just because it worked for her, doesn't mean it works for everyone. Degrees don't guarantee careers anymore. And being saddled with debt doesn't mean you're automatically successful. Looking back, I don't even regret saying it. It needed to be said. Sometimes the only way to silence someone who thinks they know it all is to hold up the mirror and let them see how flawed their assumptions really are. And in that moment, that's exactly what happened. That's where this story ends. There's something funny about how family can latch onto one idea and refuse to let go, even when the world has clearly changed. That aunt had her whole worldview shattered in a single sentence. It's kind of wild how quick a conversation can flip like that. And honestly, the quiet after a comment like that must have been priceless. This next story is about a worker at a car wash who had to deal with a rude customer that refused to follow the simplest rule and ended up getting hit with a bit of petty revenge. I work at a small car wash, and the flow of business here is unpredictable. Some days it's dead quiet, and other days it feels like every single car in the city shows up at once. We see all kinds of people, and for the most part, they're tolerable, especially the ones who sign up for memberships. Here's how the membership works. We give people a barcode sticker, and they're supposed to put it on their windshield. That way, when they drive in, our scanner reads it automatically and lets them through. Simple, right? Except a surprising number of people refuse to actually stick it on their windshield. Instead, they keep it on a slip of paper and just hold it up against the glass when they pull in. Like, somehow that's easier than peeling off the back and sticking it where it belongs. Now, management has cracked down on this. Corporate's big rule now is that if you're a member, you must have the sticker properly displayed. No exceptions. Their reasoning is to prevent people from sharing memberships with friends or family. Honestly, it's not the most brilliant policy, but it's not my call. All I know is that my bosses are constantly on me to enforce it. And when I say constantly, I mean if we let someone slide, we hear about it. So when a customer refuses, I have to stand there and politely remind them that this isn't my personal rule. It's company policy. Usually, people will either grumble a bit and finally put the sticker up, or they'll cancel their membership altogether. And at that point, I honestly don't care. If someone's that upset about a sticker, maybe this isn't the place for them. Earlier this week, though, I had an encounter with a woman who looked like she was born to be a Karen. And when I say Karen, I mean the whole package. She was short, blonde, had oversized sunglasses that practically covered half her face, and was driving a car way too big for her. The moment she rolled in, I could already feel my patience wearing thin. I gave her the usual cheerful greeting, but she completely ignored me, just holding her barcode slip up to the glass like I was invisible. I tried to be polite and said, "Just so you know, we have a new policy that says you have to put your..." That's when she cut me off. Right away. No pause. In this sharp, grating voice, she said, "I know. They told me last time that I have to. I haven't had time and I'm not doing it." I was stunned for a second, but I tried to keep calm. I said, "I'm just saying." But before I could even finish, she cut me off again. This time she snapped, "I pay $27 a month, so I should be able to put it wherever I want." At that point, I reminded her, as calmly as possible, that this wasn't my policy. It wasn't me making up random rules. She brushed me off, drove through, and went straight to the vacuums like the conversation never even happened. After she finished vacuuming, I walked over again, still keeping my tone polite, and said, "Just so you're aware, you most likely won't be allowed back in next time if your sticker isn't up." She gave me this exaggerated look of annoyance and said, "Okay, well then, I'll most likely be canceling my membership." I didn't show it on my face, but inside I was cheering. If she canceled, that would be one less headache to deal with. Still, the whole thing had me fuming. I'd been dealing with people like this for months, and every time it felt like we were the bad guys for asking them to do the bare minimum. After she left, I sat at the computer and pulled up her account information. I stared at the screen for a while, debating with myself. Finally, I decided to take some petty revenge. I changed her barcode number to a different one. What does that mean? Well, next time she tries to come in, the system isn't going to recognize her code. It might even register her account as inactive. Worst case scenario, we'll just issue her a new barcode. But here's the kicker. When we issue a new one, we're required to make sure it gets stuck to the windshield immediately. And since a new sticker takes 24 hours to activate, she'll have to deal with a little extra inconvenience before she can use the wash again. So, whether she cancels or keeps her membership, either way, she'll have to cooperate with the rule she thought she was above. And to anyone else who gets upset about this, let me just say, your windshield is going to survive with a sticker on it. Everyone else manages just fine. It's not like we're asking you for a kidney. We're just enforcing a basic rule. The reality is, we're overworked, underpaid employees doing our jobs. We don't care how much you're paying for your membership. We care about being treated like actual people. If you treat us with respect, we'll gladly go out of our way to make your experience smooth. But if you treat us like servants, don't be surprised if we quietly make things just a little more inconvenient for you in return. That story wraps up here. There's something kind of satisfying about small, harmless revenge like this. It doesn't hurt anyone, but it definitely puts a dent in someone's sense of entitlement. The funniest part is, all of it could have been avoided if she just stuck the sticker on like she was supposed to. I feel like this story really shows how much energy people waste fighting over the tiniest things. This next story is about a driver who got stuck in an unfair insurance battle after an accident and ended up outsmarting the company when they tried to block him from getting a clean driving record. So here's how this all started. My wife was driving in Toronto years ago. She was at an intersection, waiting at the red light, when the advanced green left arrow lit up. She did exactly what every driver does in that situation. She started making her left turn. Across the way, the cars in the opposite direction also got their green left turn arrows, so they were turning too. Pretty standard setup, nothing unusual. Except one guy on the other side wasn't paying attention. Instead of noticing that his light to go straight was still red, he just saw the car next to him start moving on their turn arrow. So he went too, straight through the red light, and he plowed right into the side of my wife's car. Naturally, I thought this was cut and dry. My wife had the right of way. He blatantly ran a red light. End of story. But when I called the insurance company, they hit me with something I did not expect. They said because my wife was turning left, she was automatically deemed equally at fault. Their reasoning? She should have anticipated that the other driver might disobey the law and waited longer before turning. I just sat there stunned. She did everything right. She followed the lights exactly as designed, and yet They were saying it was 50-50 fault. I argued, but they were firm. That was their final ruling, and I could already tell this was going to be one of those losing battles. The good news was the car wasn't totaled. The damage was mostly cosmetic, about $4,000 worth, but the vehicle was still safe and drivable. It was an older second car we barely used anyway, so I decided not to go through insurance. I figured if I filed a claim, my rates would skyrocket, and I'd be paying for it for years. Instead, we just ate the cost ourselves and moved on. Fast forward about 9 months. Life threw us a curveball, and we had to move to another province. That meant switching insurance companies. No big deal, I thought. I'll just show the new company my clean driving record from the old one, and it'll be fine. Except, of course, it wasn't fine. When I went back to my old insurance company to get the paperwork, the woman behind the counter looked at the file and told me they couldn't provide a clean driving record. Her reasoning? Because technically we had been in an at-fault accident, even though we never filed a claim. She said they had to tell the new company that. I gave her my best, "Are you kidding me? Look," but she didn't budge. She even said, "Rules are rules, and it would be dishonest otherwise." That phrase, "rules are rules," stuck with me. I went home, annoyed, and pulled up the company's official rules, and there it was in black and white. Customers had up to 1 year to file a claim after an accident, and it had only been 9 months since my wife's. The light bulb went off. If they were going to ding my record no matter what, I figured I might as well use the rules to my advantage. So I marched back into the office, smiled politely at the same employee, and said, "You know what? If you're going to hold me liable for this accident, I may as well go ahead and fix it. I'll file a claim now, get the car repaired, use a rental while it's in the shop, and run the bill as high as it needs to go. And then I'll be sending a letter to your head office explaining what I did, why I did it, and how much money your integrity has cost the company. And I'll make sure to mention you personally, Miss Karen Smith." There was a very long pause. You could see the gears turning in her head. And then she said, "Well, maybe we can find a workaround." 10 minutes later, she handed me the letter I needed. It said I had a claims-free driving history with their company. Not accident-free, but claims-free. And that was all the new insurance company cared about. They accepted it, and everything went through without a problem. In the end, I didn't have to file a thing, my rates didn't spike, and the car was still running fine. It was one of those moments where the system tried to trap me, but a little bit of digging turned the tables. And honestly, it confirmed what I already knew deep down. Insurance companies are the devil. That's the end of this story. This one really shows how ridiculous insurance logic can get. They'll twist rules in their favor until someone calls their bluff. The funniest part is that a simple rewording from accident-free to claims-free made the whole problem disappear. It's wild how technicalities like that can control everything. And yeah, the way he handled it was kind of brilliant. This next story is about an IT worker stuck in a never-ending battle with a client who refuses to follow instructions and keeps a simple ticket stuck in limbo. I work in IT for the state, and my team specifically handles phone support for other government offices. We're the people who deal with things like Teams phones, VoIP phones, and the occasional headset issue. Most of the time, it's routine and straightforward. Resetting passwords, helping someone figure out how to transfer a call, updating voicemail greetings, stuff like that. But every once in a while, a ticket comes in that makes you want to bang your head against the desk. Yesterday, I got one of those tickets. It came from an office that needed updates to their call tree. For anyone who's not familiar, a call tree is what you get when you dial a number and hear something like, "Press 1 for billing, press 2 for sales." Sometimes those can go deeper, like pressing 1 might give you a whole new menu with more options. It can get complicated, but at its core, it's just a routing system. Usually a request like this is no big deal. Just updating names, removing extensions for people who left, maybe adding a transfer line for a new employee. But this time, no such luck. This ticket was basically asking for an overhaul of the entire call tree. Instead of simple tweaks, they wanted multiple sections rebuilt from the ground up, and 3 of those sections involved miniature call trees branching off the main one. Now, here's the thing. I can handle the basics. I can update names, I can remove or add blind transfers. But when it comes to rebuilding entire branches of a call tree, that has to go through a group called Highpoint. They're the ones with the access and tools to handle that kind of advanced work. So I did everything I could on my end. I updated what was in my control, and then I submitted a ticket to High Point for the bigger changes. They responded quickly and said, "No problem, but we're going to need new main menu recordings from the office before we can proceed." That makes sense. You can't rebuild a branch of a call tree if you don't have the audio prompts that go with it. I thought this was straightforward. I went back to the original ticket and explained the situation clearly. I told the woman at that office that High Point is handling the advanced sections, that they need her office to provide the new recordings, and that if she emailed them to me, I'd pass them along directly to the High Point tech. That should have been the end of it, but no. She either didn't read what I wrote or just ignored it completely. Instead, she started demanding a list of what their call flow looks like. Apparently, I had given her one before, and she expected the same thing again. The reason I had sent her a call flow diagram previously was because she was insisting a section existed that actually didn't, and she thought I was deliberately making her life difficult. To prove my point that I wasn't, I had sent her a screenshot of the call tree. This time, she decided she needed that again, even though I explained repeatedly that the template she had attached already showed what the final call tree would look like. Still, I conceded and sent her the information, but I also told her very explicitly, this is not the finished product. Sections X, Y, and Z are being handled by High Point. They are waiting for you to send them the main menu recordings before they can complete it. Until then, the call tree cannot be finished. I left it at that and ended my day. When I came in the next morning, I made the mistake of hoping things might have improved. My inbox quickly shattered that hope. Before I even got to my desk, she had already sent me multiple emails. Each one was a complaint. The call tree wasn't complete. The sections didn't look like she wanted them to. Why was I sending her unfinished work? Why wasn't this resolved yet? Every single issue she brought up was about the sections that High Point was handling. The same sections that were stuck because she hadn't sent the recordings. So, for the fourth time, I reiterated everything again. I told her I could not make those changes myself. There's already a ticket open with High Point to update those sections exactly according to her template, but they will not proceed until she provides the new main menu recordings. And that's where we are now. The ticket is stuck in perpetual limbo. High Point is waiting. I'm waiting. The entire process is paused because she refuses to send a couple of simple audio files. And on top of it all, she's acting like I'm the one holding everything up. At this point, I don't even know when, or if, this will get resolved. For now, it's just going to be another circus of back and forth emails until she finally does the one thing only she can do. That story stops there. This is such a perfect example of how one person can hold up an entire process. It's wild how she kept demanding updates while ignoring the fact that she was the missing piece. I think anyone who's worked support can picture exactly how this played out. And honestly, the sheer patience it takes to explain the same thing over and over deserves respect. This next story is about someone who tried to help a friend escape a bad situation, only for that friend to start disrespecting their home and trust. I'm 21, and a little while ago, I reached out to a friend who's 20. We weren't super close, more like acquaintances I'd hung out with a few times, but she posted something on Snapchat that made it clear she was in a rough spot. She had just gotten married a few months back, and her husband was being abusive both physically and emotionally. She said she wanted out, and I felt bad for her. I told her I was here if she needed someone to talk to, and I even offered her a temporary place to stay with me and my boyfriend at our apartment. I wasn't expecting much from it, just trying to do the decent thing and help her get back on her feet. She took me up on the offer, and 2 weeks ago, she moved in. At first, it felt good to be able to help. She had a full-time job, plus she did tattooing and nails on the side, so I figured she'd be working and saving to get her own place soon. But almost right away, things started getting uncomfortable. She began bringing people over to the apartment. Some of them were clients for tattoo work, but others were just people she wanted to hang out with. The thing is, she's a very social and active person, and she likes hooking up with people. I'm not judging her for that. I've lived my own life and made my own choices, but I told her up front I didn't want any of that happening in my apartment. If she wanted to do that, she needed to go to their place. She didn't listen. In just 2 weeks, she went back to her ex-husband's place a couple of times and hooked up with multiple other people. And even though she promised she wouldn't bring anyone over for that, She kept asking me about it anyway. Each time, I said no. My boyfriend and I don't even live in the best neighborhood, and not long ago, my car got broken into. Having strangers coming in and out of our apartment just wasn't safe, and I told her that clearly. The breaking point came one morning at 4 a.m. I had my alarm set for work, and when I woke up, I noticed my bedroom door was open. I looked across the hall and saw her door open too. She walked out with a guy. I had no idea she'd invited anyone over. No heads up, no permission, nothing. I immediately texted her, asking who he was. She apologized right away and said it was someone she'd fallen in love with. She insisted they didn't hook up, but honestly, I didn't believe her. And I'm sure she never would have said a word about him being there if I hadn't caught them leaving her room. At that point, the trust was gone. She offered to give me money for rent and said she'd start looking for her own place. I told her that was for the best. I didn't want to keep going through this cycle of asking her not to cross boundaries, only to have her do it anyway. My boyfriend and I just moved into this apartment in August. We still had unpacking to do, and we wanted to enjoy finally having our own space after a bad roommate situation before. Instead, here we were again, stressed out and uncomfortable in our own home. All I ever wanted was to help her escape an abusive situation and have a safe place to regroup. I thought she'd take the time to stabilize herself, focus on work, and plan her next step. But instead, it felt like she was using our space to do whatever she wanted without respect for us. Thankfully, the ending wasn't as explosive as I feared. We sat down and talked about it, and she admitted she understood what she did wrong. She agreed to leave and go stay with her mom while figuring out her next move. She's leaving tonight, and she's doing it without a fight. Honestly, I'm relieved. I've learned my lesson through this. I don't regret trying to help, but I know now that opening my home to someone, especially someone I'm not very close to, comes with the risks I wasn't prepared for, and I won't be putting myself or my boyfriend in this position again. That's where the story ends. This feels like one of those situations where good intentions backfired in the worst way. You can tell they really wanted to help, but boundaries got crossed fast. It's good the friend left without drama, but it still left a heavy mark. Honestly, it shows how even small favors can spiral into something way bigger than expected. This next story is about a mom at a toddler petting zoo who had to deal with a grandmother trying to cut the line just so her grandkid could get photos first. So today I took my toddler to a petting zoo event. You know the kind. There's animals to look at, a couple of little activity stations, and a big photo area where families can line up to get those cute "my kid with a goat" moments. Honestly, I thought it would be a fun way to spend the day. But as every parent knows, anything involving a line and toddlers is basically a patience marathon. From the start, all the kids were a little fussy. That's just the reality of toddlers. They get restless. They want to run around. They don't understand waiting in the same way adults do. My own toddler was getting antsy, squirming and tugging at my arm while we inched closer and closer to the front. I kept reminding him gently that we were waiting our turn, because we'd been practicing that concept lately. And let me tell you, teaching patience to a toddler is like teaching a cat to swim. Possible, but definitely not easy. To add to the challenge, I'm 8 months pregnant right now. So picture me standing in line, balancing a squirmy little kid on one side, a very pregnant belly in front, and the slow crawl of families ahead of us. I was tired, hot, and just trying to get through this one photo op without a meltdown. Finally, it was our turn. We had been waiting patiently, and I was ready to shuffle forward and let my toddler have his moment with the animals. But right as we're about to step up, a different toddler suddenly darts out of nowhere and pushes past us straight into the photo area. I blinked in surprise, and my first thought was maybe she belonged to the family in front of us. But no. When I turned to look, I realized her family wasn't even close to the front. Her grandmother was standing about 3 families back. The little girl had just run up, and the grandma hadn't even tried to stop her. The grandma called out, "Oh, I'm so sorry," in this sing-songy voice. But she didn't make any move to actually go grab the child. Meanwhile, this toddler is already up there poking at things and getting in the space where we were supposed to be. I tried to be understanding. I mean, toddlers are unpredictable. They don't always listen, and sometimes they bolt. So I turned around and said, "No problem, totally normal for a toddler. I'll just wait a second for you to grab her so my child doesn't get distracted when we go up." I thought that was fair and pretty patient. especially considering the situation. But then the grandma started walking up toward us. And when I say walking, I mean at the slowest possible pace. She didn't even look flustered. She was fiddling with her phone as she made her way forward, swiping at the screen like she was scrolling social media. I realized, with growing disbelief, that she was opening her camera app. She got up to the front where her grandkid was still playing around, and instead of taking her by the hand, she stood there next to her, holding her phone up. And then she looked right at me and said, "Can I just snap her photos since I'm up here?" I almost laughed because I couldn't believe the audacity. Here I am, holding back my toddler who's been waiting patiently, swollen ankles from standing in line, trying to teach him that we wait our turn. And this woman is asking to cut in for a little photo shoot just because her grandkid happened to run up ahead. I took a breath, kept my voice calm, and said, "Well, that wouldn't be fair since there's a line, and we're teaching our toddlers how to wait in line." The grandma scoffed loudly, like I was the one being unreasonable. She finally reached down and took hold of her grandkid, but not before rolling her eyes and sighing dramatically. Then, as she shuffled back toward her place in line, she made this whole production out of huffing and muttering under her breath. She walked slower than slow, like she wanted everyone to notice how put out she was. At that point, I couldn't resist. I smiled sweetly and said, "Thank you. We wouldn't want this generation to grow up thinking they're entitled not to wait in line just because they don't feel like it." She didn't respond, but the look on her face said everything. Now, maybe it was my pregnancy hormones making me extra snappy. But honestly, I don't think so. Because not 10 minutes later, something else happened that showed me I was being fair. Another toddler came over to where my kid was playing and, in true toddler fashion, smacked him in the head with a toy. She wanted what he had and didn't know how else to go about it. Her mom immediately rushed over, horrified, apologizing again and again. I laughed it off and told her it was fine because that's just what toddlers do sometimes. My kid has done it too. No big deal. That moment felt completely different. I didn't feel annoyed. I didn't feel frustrated. I felt understanding because it was a kid being a kid and a parent handling it. But with the grandma, it wasn't about a toddler being impulsive. It was about an adult trying to use that impulsiveness as an excuse to cut in line and get what she wanted. And that's the difference. Kids are going to make mistakes. Adults should know better. So, hormones or not, I think my frustration was justified. That's where the story ends. The part that stands out here is how the grandma pulled her phone out like she was staging her own VIP session. It's wild how some people will twist a kid's behavior into an opportunity for themselves. At least the mom with the toy incident showed how it should be handled, with accountability. The sweet little clapback at the end made this story even better, though. This next story is about someone who unknowingly dated a guy with a girlfriend and ended up teaming up with her to dump him in the most perfectly petty way. Last year, I met a guy at a concert. It wasn't planned. It wasn't something I was expecting. We just struck up a conversation, and before I knew it, we were laughing and getting along like we'd known each other for a while. When the show ended, he even walked me to my car, which felt sweet and old-fashioned in a way. It gave me this little spark of hope because I hadn't had a promising date in, well, let's just say it had been a long time. As we talked that night, it turned out we were both planning to go to a festival the very next day. We made tentative plans to meet up there. Later on, though, I realized something funny. He hadn't really been planning to go at all. He only decided to show up because I said I was going. Honestly, I didn't mind. We met up, spent the day together, and had a great time. For me, it felt like maybe this could be the start of something. Over the next week, we texted back and forth. Nothing too over the top, but enough to keep that spark alive. 4 days after our date, I was at another event, all dressed up, and I decided to send him a photo of me looking dolled up. Just a fun little thinking of you kind of message. That's when things went sideways. Not long after sending the photo, I got a voicemail. The voice on the other end wasn't his. It was a woman. Calm, clear, and to the point. She introduced herself as his girlfriend. She said she had seen my text pop up on his phone, got my number from it, and wanted to know how long I'd known him and what the nature of our relationship was. She asked me to please return the call. I just sat there processing for a second. A girlfriend? He never mentioned anything about having one. He had been acting like a single guy, free to date, free to meet people. Meanwhile, my phone buzzed again. This time it was him. He had clearly found out that she was calling me. His messages were frantic, telling me not to answer her, not to engage. He said she was a drama queen, that she was just trying to stir things up, and that it was nothing. But here's the thing. She had unsupervised access to his phone at 9:30 on a Saturday night. That didn't exactly scream drama queen to me. That screamed long-term relationship. So I made my choice. I wasn't going to cover for him. I wasn't going to get roped into his mess. I texted her back directly. My message was short and to the point. Hi, name. He and I just met last week. Dump his ass, then pretend to take him back and dump him again for me. She responded almost immediately with, done and done. Thank you. I don't know exactly how she handled it after that. I don't know if she really did the whole fake reconciliation followed by a second breakup, but oh man, I really hope she did. The idea of him thinking he'd been forgiven, only to get dumped all over again, was just too perfect. For me, it was the cleanest way to handle a messy situation. No drama, no covering for him, no dragging it out. Just a quick team up with another woman who deserved better, and then letting the trash take itself out. That's where the story ends. There's something really satisfying about how quick and clean this whole thing went down. Instead of getting pulled into the lies, they just joined forces and cut him off at the knees. Honestly, that little dump him, then dump him again line is gold. If he was hoping to juggle two women, he definitely picked the wrong ones. This next story is about a young woman who cut off her dad after years of being mistreated in her blended family and now faces pressure to reconnect even though she doesn't want to. I'm 19 now, but to explain how this all happened, I need to go back a bit. I grew up mostly with my dad. He was a single parent for as long as I could remember, since my biological mom wasn't around at all. I never met her, never had her in my life, so it was just me and my dad for the first 10 years. When I was 10, my dad met a woman named Tina. 2 years later, they got married. Tina had a son named Todd. He was about 6 when I first met him, and to put it lightly, it didn't go well. He had multiple challenges. He was autistic, but he also had a genetic disorder that doctors said meant he likely wouldn't live to adulthood. On top of that, he struggled with disturbing mental health issues connected to everything he was dealing with. I'll never forget our first meeting. Todd came at me out of nowhere, charged at me, and bit me so badly that I had to get stitches. That was our introduction. I begged my dad not to let them move in with us. I told him how scared I was and how uncomfortable it made me. But they did anyway. My dad reassured me it would get better once Todd settled in and got better treatment. But it never got better. In fact, it got so much worse. And the message I got over and over was that I wasn't allowed to be upset about it. If I ever complained, I was told it wasn't Todd's fault, that I should be grateful I was healthy and would live a long life. By the time I was 16, it had gotten unbearable. I was having nightmares every night. I spent as much time away from home as I possibly could. And when I was home, I was lectured for not helping Tina more, or for not trying harder to bond with the family. The one adult who actually saw how bad things were was my coach at school. He became a lifeline for me. He'd schedule individual training sessions, not so much for the workouts, but so I'd have a safe place to rest. Sometimes I'd take naps in his office or catch up on homework there. He was the only reason I didn't completely fall apart, and the only reason my grades stayed up. Then came the moment everything broke down completely. I was 16, stressed out from trying to juggle schoolwork and preparing for a regional track meet. At the same time, Todd was having one of his bad days, and Tina was trying to calm him through another meltdown. I went downstairs to print a paper since my laptop wasn't connecting to the wireless. Todd grabbed it in a fit and smashed it on the floor. My laptop shattered, and something in me snapped. I don't even remember what I did next. My dad told me later that he had to physically drag me off of Todd because I had completely lost control. After that, Tina said I had to go. My dad sided with her. He sent me to live with my aunt and told me I could come back when everyone had calmed down, but only if I was willing to apologize and be part of the family. I said fine, and then I didn't talk to him again. For my entire senior year, I ignored his calls and his messages. And honestly, that was the most peaceful year of high school I ever had. After graduation, I joined the Navy. It's probably the best decision I've made. I feel stronger, healthier, and more stable now. I have shipmates and friends who actually feel like family. For the first time, I don't feel like I'm carrying the weight of everyone else's problems. But my dad never stopped trying to reach me. He's called, he's messaged, he's tried every angle. I've never answered. A few months ago, my aunt told me Todd had passed away. I didn't go to the funeral, but I did send a card and flowers. That was my way of acknowledging it. Then, last week, my dad managed to get in touch with me through my aunt's phone. He begged me to talk to him. He said he was sorry for sending me away. He said at the time he felt stuck in the middle and thought maybe space would help. He told me he didn't want us to be estranged. And I told him the truth. I reminded him of what he said back then, that I couldn't come back unless I apologized and became part of the family. I told him I wasn't going to be part of the family that abandoned me, and I was never going to apologize for fighting back after years of being treated like nothing. I told him if it made him feel better, my aunt could let him know I was alive now and then, but that was as close as he was going to get. My aunt was disappointed and said I was being a jerk. Then Tina's sister somehow found my old Gmail account and sent me this huge, angry message about how cruel I was being and how I was kicking them while they're down. But here's the thing. I don't think I am. I think sometimes being called an AH is just the price of protecting yourself. And after everything I went through, I'm okay with that. That story ends there. It's hard not to feel the weight of this one. Some bridges just get burned beyond repair, no matter how much someone wants to pretend things can go back to normal. The part that stood out to me is how peaceful life became once the drama was out of the picture. Sometimes that silence says more than words ever could. And honestly, the Navy ending feels like the first real chapter of her own life beginning. This next story is about a dad who stepped in when his wife and teenage daughter got into a heated argument, only to be accused of undermining his wife's authority. I've got a 16-year-old daughter. For most of her life, her mom and I had shared custody, splitting things 50-50. Recently, though, her mom and stepdad moved out of the country for work, and she chose to live with me full-time. A few years back, I remarried. My wife has generally been a great stepmom. She and my daughter usually got along really well, and when our son was born, he's 6 now, my daughter absolutely adored him. He feels the same way about her. The two of them are really close, and it's been nice to see that bond grow. But lately, something feels different. My wife has been acting a little strange around my daughter. Nothing explosive, but just this undercurrent of tension that wasn't there before. The real problem showed up last night. My daughter and my son were in the living room playing together. Their play can get a little rough sometimes, but that's how my son likes it. They were laughing and running around, just having fun. I was in the kitchen washing dishes when I suddenly heard my wife's voice raised in anger. It was loud enough that I immediately stopped what I was doing and went to check. When I stepped in, I found the two of them in the middle of an argument. My daughter looked upset, and my wife was red-faced and angry. I asked what was going on. My daughter explained first. She said she and my son were playing when my wife walked in and started yelling at her for being too rough with him. She said she apologized and told my wife she'd be more gentle. But then my son, being a 6-year-old, said he wanted to keep playing rough. My daughter told him, "Sorry, but your mom said no." That's when, according to her, my wife exploded. She started accusing my daughter of being disrespectful. My daughter insisted she wasn't trying to be, just following the rule. I turned to my wife to confirm, and instead of explaining calmly, she got defensive right away. She raised her voice again, yelling that I was making her look like a lunatic in front of my daughter, that I was undermining her authority, and that I was teaching my daughter it was okay to treat her however she wanted. By then, I was fed up. I told her to go calm down and talk to me later when she was ready to act like an adult. Since then, she hasn't spoken to me. She's giving me the cold shoulder, clearly upset that I didn't back her up in front of my daughter. Now I'm stuck wondering if I was wrong for siding with my daughter in the moment. From my perspective, she didn't do anything wrong. She listened, she apologized, she adjusted, and she even tried to explain things to her brother in a way he'd understand. I didn't see any disrespect. I just saw a kid being reasonable, but my wife seems to think I completely undermined her, and she's acting like I betrayed her. That's where things stand right now. That's where this story finishes. This one really shows how quickly tension can build in blended families. The daughter seemed to handle it pretty maturely, especially for being 16, which makes the blow-up feel unnecessary. What stood out most to me is how the dad was stuck between keeping peace with his wife and standing up for what was fair in the moment, and sometimes those two things don't line up. This next story is about a hotel worker who got a late-night call from a scammer pretending to be from IT, trying to trick staff into sending fake refunds. I work nights at a hotel, And if you've ever done night audit, you know the routine. It's usually quiet, sometimes eerie, and occasionally interrupted by the strangest things. But recently, we all had to deal with something new. A scammer targeting multiple locations in our hotel chain. He was slick at first. Each time he called, he introduced himself as James from head office IT. He spoke in this official tone, like he was just doing his job, and said he'd already called earlier, but was told to ring back at this time to run an update. He'd even throw out some random ticket number that sounded cryptic enough to maybe be real, but not detailed enough to actually make sense. Then came the real request. He'd say he needed whoever answered to install a piece of software from some shady website so he could perform a critical update. The problem for him is none of us could even do that if we wanted to. All of our workstations require admin access, and only the real IT department has those credentials. Big red flag right there. So when the software excuse didn't work, he'd move to phase 2. He claimed that since we couldn't do the update, he needed to run tests to check how bad the problem was. Those tests? He wanted staff to send multiple test refunds of $499 each to credit card numbers he provided. He tried to make it sound like a standard procedure, but really it was just a blatant cash grab dressed up in tech jargon. Sadly, one night auditor in the company actually fell for it. They processed those fake refunds, and this scammer, bold as anything, called back the next night asking for the same guy specifically. Luckily, he wasn't working that shift. The auditor who answered instead pressed him to properly identify himself. As soon as they did, the scammer hung up without another word. After that, our head office sent out an email to every location warning about the scam. Clear instructions. Do not follow any directions from this caller. If he reaches out, report it and shut it down. And wouldn't you know it, a few hours after that email landed in my inbox, my phone rang. Same guy, James from head office IT. Same story, same attempt. But I didn't even bother engaging. I was busy and didn't have time to play around, though part of me would have loved to waste his time. Instead, I cut him off and told him flatly that every single location had been instructed to transfer any supposed IT calls at night straight to our security desk. The line went dead instantly. Not even a goodbye, not even a click. Just silence, and then nothing. He knew he'd been caught. I can only hope that word gets around to enough night staff. The late shift can be boring sometimes, and if you've got time, stringing this guy along could waste his night instead of him trying to waste yours. But the biggest thing is making sure no one else gets tricked into those fake refunds. That's where this story ends. It's crazy how far scammers will go to make themselves sound official. The part that gets me is how he tried to act confident, even calling back for the same person after already pulling it off once. Honestly, there's something satisfying about picturing him hanging up the second he realized he wasn't going to win. And I bet wasting his time would actually be kind of fun for someone on a long night shift. This next story is about someone who went to the bank to check on their debit card, only to get scolded by a teller for the simple crime of saying their own name. A few months ago, I had just landed a new job. That meant a bunch of little errands and paperwork, including sorting some things out at my bank. One of the things I requested was a new debit card. The process seemed pretty straightforward. Fill out the paperwork, wait a few days, then come back to check if it was ready. When I first went in, the woman helping me at the counter was polite enough. She took my information, explained the process, and told me to come back in a few days. Easy. Nothing unusual. Fast forward to later that week. I walked back into the branch, thinking it would be a simple in-and-out trip. You know that feeling when you're expecting something quick, like picking up a package? That's exactly where my head was. I figured I'd be in line for a couple of minutes, show my ID, get my card, and head home. When I reached the counter, a teller greeted me. She asked how she could help. I smiled and said, "Hello, can you please check if the debit card for my name is finished?" She nodded and said, "Okay," before disappearing into a back room. I assumed she was going to check the status or look through some files. While she was gone, I started fishing my ID out of my wallet, figuring I'd need it no matter what. And then it happened. Out of nowhere, I heard her voice echo from the back room. "You can't take the card." Her voice was so loud and sudden that I froze. My hand was halfway pulling my ID out, and I just stood there, confused. The other teller working at the branch glanced up too, eyebrows raised, like even she didn't know what was going on. A moment later, the first woman popped her head out of the back room. She looked right at me and said again, in this stern voice, "Even if you have an ID, you can't take the card." Now I was beyond confused. I wasn't trying to take anything. I wasn't sneaking around or pretending. All I'd done was politely ask if my debit card was ready. I put my ID down on the counter just to show I was prepared, and I asked her, "Why not?" She looked me straight in the eye and said, "Are you my name?" I said yes. And that's when she hit me with it. "Then why did you come here and ask if the card for my name was done? That makes it look like you're someone else asking for it." I blinked at her, trying to wrap my head around the logic. To me, it made perfect sense to state my name up front. If she was going through files or a system, hearing my name should have made it easier for her to find me. But to her, apparently, me saying my own name was suspicious. I tried to explain calmly. I said, "Well, I said my name so it would be easier for you to find me." But she shook her head and came back with, "I could have found your name on your ID." At this point, the other teller behind the counter gave the most obvious eye roll I've ever seen. She looked like she'd dealt with this exact behavior before and was completely over it. I didn't want to argue. The whole situation was already ridiculous, and I could feel myself getting frustrated. So I just put on my most polite voice and said, "Okay, I'm very sorry for telling you my name, ma'am." The second teller actually chuckled under her breath at that, and for a split second I felt like at least someone else was on my side. The first woman looked like she wanted to keep pushing, but she held herself back. Instead, she told me the card wasn't ready yet and to come back another time. I left the bank still shaking my head. On the walk home, I started replaying the conversation in my mind, wondering if maybe I'd asked in some strange or misleading way. But the more I thought about it, the less sense it made. What else was I supposed to say? Was I supposed to slam my ID on the counter without a word? Or just grunt, "Card?" That didn't feel right either. The entire situation felt like she had taken a normal interaction and twisted it into some weird power play. It wasn't like I'd tried to claim someone else's card. I'd literally given my own name, the same name printed on the ID I was holding in my hand. After that experience, I made a mental note. Anytime I needed to go back to the bank, I'd avoid her counter completely. I started lining up for the other teller instead, and those interactions were smooth and easy every single time. With her, things were normal again. I'd walk in, she'd check, she'd answer clearly, and there were no lectures about whether I was allowed to say my own name. And with that, all was finally well in the world. That's where this story finishes. This story cracked me up in the weirdest way. Imagine getting scolded for introducing yourself like a normal person. It's such a small thing, but it shows how some people love to turn everyday situations into unnecessary drama. And honestly, that little sarcastic, "sorry for saying my name" line was the perfect way to handle it. This next story is about an employee who made a joke to their manager about work schedules, only for it to spiral into an HR complaint that looked a lot like blackmail. So I work at a call center. If you've ever worked one, you know the environment is already stressful enough, without leadership constantly changing things. Over the past year, it's felt like one never-ending cycle of adjustments. At the beginning of the year, they scrapped our 410 schedules. That was the setup where we'd work 4 days a week with 10-hour shifts, and then enjoy 3 days off. Losing that system really stung. For me, it felt like they took away 52 extra days of breathing room each year. Since then, they've been tinkering with SOPs nonstop. Every month or two, it's something new. Policies are updated, processes are rewritten, and everyone's expected to adjust immediately. I wasn't thrilled about it, but I tried to take things in stride. I've consistently hit my metrics and done my job. Still, I've never stopped missing those 410s. It became kind of a running gag between me and my manager. Every one-on-one meeting we had, I'd throw in some version of, "So, any chance we're going back to 410s?" My manager always shut it down quickly with a firm no. I knew that was coming, but it didn't stop me. I'd follow it up with a little joke, usually sending the Matthew McConaughey meme where he says, "It'd be a lot cooler if you did." Maybe it was a little annoying, but it was lighthearted, and it was my small way of poking fun at the situation. In our most recent meeting, I decided to switch things up. I asked my manager if the annual manager survey was coming up soon. That's the survey where employees rate their managers on performance and leadership. My manager said yes, and without thinking too hard about how it might sound, I said, "Well, you'd certainly get a better score if I had 410s. My manager gave me this look and said, "You can't just blackmail me to get 410s. I laughed because in my mind, it was obvious that I wasn't serious. But instead of backing off, I doubled down, still joking. I replied, "I don't know. That response kind of sounds like someone who's getting all threes on their survey. We both chuckled awkwardly. I said it wasn't a big deal if it wasn't possible, and then we moved on with the rest of the meeting. To me, it was just a bad joke, nothing more. But apparently, my manager didn't see it the same way. The next day, I logged into work and found a meeting request waiting for me. The invite included not just my manager, but also the site head and our department manager. My stomach dropped immediately. That's never a good sign. When the meeting started, they told me my manager had filed an HR complaint against me. According to them, I'd attempted to blackmail my manager into giving me the shift schedule I wanted. I tried to defend myself. I explained it was just a joke, a bad one, that didn't land. I said it wasn't a real threat, that even if I gave them all threes on the survey, it wouldn't have a big impact. It's not like a 3 is even a terrible score, and one survey alone wouldn't make or break anything. But they didn't see it that way. From their perspective, it didn't matter if I meant it as a joke. What mattered was that I tied my manager's performance evaluation to what I wanted, and that crossed a line. Now there's an ongoing HR case with my name attached to it. They told me I'll probably end up with a written warning in my file, and because of that, I'll likely be ineligible for my annual raise. All because I thought I was being clever with a joke. So here I am, with nothing to show for it except more stress and one very clear lesson. Don't even jokingly dabble in blackmail at a call center. That's where the story ends. That one really shows how a quick joke can backfire when the wrong people take it seriously. The funniest part is how harmless it seemed in the moment, but the aftermath was way heavier than expected. It's wild how thin the line can be in corporate settings, especially when HR gets involved. And now, the whole thing feels like the definition of a small slip turning into a massive headache. This next story is about an employee who was told to look busier at work and decided to take that advice to the most hilariously extreme level. A few years back, I was working at a production company. It wasn't anything glamorous, just your typical 8 to 5 kind of job. I had my daily responsibilities, and after a while, I got really good at them. So good, in fact, that I usually finished everything before noon. By lunchtime, I'd be done for the day, sitting there with hours left on the clock and nothing else to do. At first, I thought this was a good thing. I mean, isn't that what bosses want? Someone who works quickly, efficiently, and delivers ahead of schedule? But apparently, I had it all wrong. After a few months of this, my supervisor pulled me aside one afternoon. He didn't look mad, exactly, but there was this awkward seriousness in his expression. He said, "You need to appear to be busier. I'm starting to get feedback that you complete your work too early." I was caught off guard. I asked him if maybe I should start helping coworkers or take on extra projects. It seemed like the logical solution: spread out the workload, contribute where I could, keep myself productive. But his answer surprised me. He said no, absolutely not. Then he leaned in like he was giving me some secret insider tip and said, "Just click your mouse, shuffle some papers, and look serious." That was it. That was his advice. And in that moment, something inside me snapped. If this was the game they wanted me to play, then fine. I'd play. But I was going to play it my way. That's when I decided to go full-on ill-mannered compliance. For the next 2 weeks, I turned looking busy into an art form. I started walking around the office with a clipboard, not just casually, but with purpose. I'd march from one corner to another, flipping pages and scribbling nonsense, looking like I was on the verge of solving some corporate crisis. Sometimes I'd even furrow my brow, pausing in the middle of the hallway like I'd just discovered something earth-shattering. At my desk, I opened random spreadsheets, clicking in and out of cells like a mad scientist. I'd squint at the screen, shake my head, and sigh deeply, as though the fate of the company depended on the formulas I was tweaking. In reality, I was just typing random letters, highlighting columns, and then undoing my work over and over again. I even started scheduling fake meetings. I'd block off my calendar with titles like Q4 Strategy Alignment or Cross-Department Synergy Review. If anyone glanced at my Outlook, they'd think I was juggling half the company's operations. One of my favorite moves was with the printer. I'd send entire batches of blank pages to it. Then I'd walk over slowly, scoop them up like they were highly confidential documents, and carry them back with a grave expression. Sometimes I'd even shuffle through the stack in front of people, nodding to myself like everything on those blank sheets made perfect sense. And to top it all off, I brought in a second monitor. On it, I displayed graphs that looked very official but contained absolutely no identifiable content, just colorful lines and bars going up and down. If anyone walked by, it looked like I was analyzing complex data sets. In reality, I was probably just resizing shapes in PowerPoint. The crazy thing is, people bought it. Within just a few days, upper management started praising me. They'd say things like, "We've noticed how hard you've been working lately," or "Your work ethic is really shining through." I had to bite my tongue every time. If only they knew I was staring at a chart with no labels, pretending to decode the mysteries of the universe. Then it went even further. Believe it or not, I actually received a promotion. Over another coworker, no less. Someone who legitimately worked much harder than me. I couldn't believe it. All it took was a clipboard, some fake meetings, and a stack of blank paper for me to leap ahead in the corporate ladder. Fast forward 3 months. I ended up taking a new position within the same company, one that I still work in today. Every now and then, I think back to that old job and laugh. I can only imagine what my coworkers thought of me back then. Maybe they believed I had some special skill set. Maybe they assumed I was in on the high-level corporate secrets. Or maybe, just maybe, they genuinely thought I was some kind of wizard, operating on a level they couldn't understand. And the best part? All I did was perfect the art of looking busy. That story wraps up here. This one feels like a scene straight out of a comedy movie. It's kind of wild how appearances mattered more than actual productivity in that office. The blank page stunt and fake meetings were genius though. And honestly, the fact that it led to a promotion makes it even funnier. Like, the system rewarded him for playing pretend better than doing the real work. This next story is about a warehouse worker who got tired of a maintenance guy ripping stickers off equipment and decided to follow the rules a little too literally. At my current job, I work in a warehouse. There's no public interaction, just me and a few coworkers handling our day-to-day tasks. Each of us uses a pallet jack, and while they technically aren't personal property, we've all kind of settled into using the same one every day. They become ours, in a way. For over a year and a half, the pallet jack I used had a small sticker with my nickname on it. It wasn't anything flashy or distracting, just a little identifier so people knew which one was mine. Between me and my 3 coworkers, there was never any confusion. Everyone had their own jack, everyone respected that, and nobody ever complained. But then we hired a new maintenance guy. For the sake of this story, let's just call him DH. From the moment he arrived, he had strong opinions about how things should look. He decided that stickers on pallet jacks, or on any warehouse equipment, were tacky and unprofessional. Some of the heavier machines had little Decepticon or Autobot emblems from a previous employee, and he hated those too. So DH took it upon himself to remove them. Anytime he saw a sticker, he ripped it off. It didn't matter what kind it was. One day, I came into work and noticed that the sticker with my nickname had been torn off my pallet jack. At first, I didn't make a big deal out of it. I just shrugged and slapped another one on there. But sure enough, the next time I was away from my area, DH ripped that one off too. So I put another one on. It became this little back and forth game that I hadn't asked for, but apparently, he was determined to win. After a while, it reached my supervisor. One day, I got called into the office. My supervisor looked serious and said, "Maintenance has complete discretion over the equipment and how it looks. If DH takes a sticker off, it needs to stay off." Then he added, "As a consequence for putting another sticker on your jack, you'll need to remove it and any others that are still on there." That was the moment the light bulb went off in my head. Fine. If no stickers were allowed, then no stickers would stay. So I went back out into the warehouse and carefully stripped every single sticker off that pallet jack. Not just my nickname, not just the fun ones. Every sticker. Warning labels, gone. Weight limits, gone. Manufacturer logos, peeled right off. By the time I was finished, the pallet jack looked like a blank slab of metal. But I didn't stop there. I went to my coworkers and explained what the supervisor had said. I told them, "Boss said no stickers on the equipment anymore." And one by one, they joined in. Together, we stripped down every pallet jack, every lift, every piece of equipment we could find. By the end of it, the warehouse looked like it had been scrubbed clean of any kind of label. And suddenly, things weren't so professional anymore. Without the warning stickers and weight limits, equipment looked bare and confusing. It wasn't unsafe. We all knew the rules by heart. but it definitely wasn't what the higher-ups had in mind when they said no stickers. For the past week, my boss hasn't spoken to me. Not a word. And honestly, I can live with that. That story ends there. This one feels like textbook malicious compliance. It's funny how one guy tried to play sticker police, only to end up with a warehouse full of equipment stripped down like it came straight from the factory. The silence from the boss says it all. They know they can't really punish anyone without admitting how silly the rules sounded in the first place, and I like that the coworkers joined in, making it a group effort. This next story is about a daughter standing up to her mom during a family dinner after years of hurtful comments about her weight. I've been overweight for as long as I can remember. It's something I've struggled with my whole life, and it didn't come out of nowhere. I have ADHD, and food became this coping mechanism for me whenever my emotions felt too big to handle. On top of that, I've always dealt with what I can only describe as food noise. It's like this constant voice in my head thinking about the next snack, the next meal, the next bite. It's exhausting, and it's also a big reason why I put on weight so quickly, and why it's been so difficult to manage. These past few months, though, I've been taking real steps to change things. I started working with a dietitian, and my boyfriend has been incredibly supportive. I've already lost 5 pounds, and even though it doesn't sound like much, for me it feels like progress I can actually be proud of. Now, my parents live across the country. They hardly ever visit because of the distance. So when they finally drove out, it turned into this big family gathering. My siblings and I are all in college, most of us in the same area. So it was kind of like a mini reunion with extended family included. I should have been excited. I should have been happy to just catch up with everyone. But instead, dinner turned into something I knew all too well. At first, it was fine. I talked about the projects I've been working on for school and mentioned something I was genuinely proud of. I joined my city's women's hockey team. Playing hockey was something I'd always wanted to do, but never had the chance until recently. For me, it was a huge deal. And then my mom chimed in. She smiled and said, "Well, it's good you're finally doing a sport. Maybe you'll take off that college weight." It felt like a punch to the gut. It wasn't the first time she'd said something like that. In fact, she's been making comments about my body for as long as I can remember. Her voice is stuck in my head every time I step onto the ice, every time I go for a workout. Instead of just being proud of myself, I hear her telling me it's not enough. I asked her, politely, to please not make comments about my weight. I told her it wasn't important. She gave me this little nod, but I knew it wasn't the end. And sure enough, a little while later, it happened again. My siblings and I were joking about the ridiculously steep hill we have to climb every day just to get to class. It's one of those hills where you feel like you're getting a workout just walking up it. Everyone was laughing about how we're all basically training for a stair marathon without meaning to. Then, right in the middle of that, my mom said, "Well, it would be easier for you if you lost weight." That was it. I snapped. I told her to stop. She tried to defend herself, saying she was only worried about my health. And I get it. Health is important. But that's not how it came across. What it felt like was her cutting me down again, making everything about my body, instead of just letting me exist in peace. So I threw her words back at her. I asked, "Why should I buy you anything if you're just gonna die anyways?" The whole table went silent. My grandparents stared at me. My dad looked shocked. My mom just froze. But here's the thing. Those weren't my words. They were hers. When I was 16, I needed a new pair of jeans. Just normal wear and tear, nothing dramatic. On the drive to the store, my mom started in on me about my weight. She went on and on, asking if I even cared about living or dying. And then she asked me that exact question. Why should I buy you anything if you're just gonna die anyways? It's burned into my memory. 6 years later, I still remember every detail of that car ride. And in that moment at the dinner table, I repeated it back to her. She looked confused, almost like she didn't remember ever saying it. But I repeated myself. I explained the context. And then I let it all out. I told her how I've always hated myself because of her constant comments, how I'm desperately trying to love myself now, but it's nearly impossible with her voice echoing in my head. I told her that's why I don't talk to her much anymore, because no matter what the topic is, she always finds a way to bring it back to my weight. The words spilled out of me, raw and heavy, and then I just couldn't sit there anymore. I got up and left. I cried the entire way home, but instead of burying myself in food the way I used to, my boyfriend took me for a walk around the park. He held my hand while I sobbed, and for the first time, I explained the full story to him. The diets my mom forced me on as a kid, the cruel comments, the weird miracle weight loss hacks she made me try. I admitted how much of my self-hatred had come directly from her. He was angry on my behalf. He told me he couldn't believe I'd been carrying that all alone, and it felt like a weight lifted, even if just a little. Later that night, my phone blew up with messages. Family members telling me I was wrong, saying I embarrassed my mom, saying I was cruel. But deep down, I knew I had finally said the thing that needed to be said. That's where this story ends. That dinner must have been rough, but it sounds like something that had been building up for years. Sometimes families act shocked when the truth gets said out loud, even if they've been the ones feeding into it the whole time. I think what stood out the most is how the boyfriend just quietly supported instead of making it worse. That's huge. It's one of those stories that leaves you feeling heavy, but also relieved that the person finally spoke up. This next story is about a customer service worker dealing with back-to-back calls from customers who refused to listen and ended up making their morning way harder than it needed to be. So let me set the scene. My company had us doing overtime, which meant I was up earlier than usual. Normally, I'm not even conscious before the sun is up, but that morning, there I was at my desk at 5:30 in the morning, groggy and already questioning my life choices, when the phone rang. The first call of the day was from a customer who was convinced we had double-dipped into his bank account. He was upset, saying that his autopay had been debited early. According to him, we had charged him when nothing should have been taken out until November. I'll admit, hearing his frustration at that hour made my head feel even heavier. I pulled up his information in both of our systems to double-check, and sure enough, nothing was set up to debit in October. What I did notice, though, was that this guy had made a payment on the 30th. Here's the thing about our system. Payments don't post instantly. They hit around 9 at night, and then they take 24 to 72 hours to actually clear from the bank. So, of course, surprise, surprise, the payment ended up falling on this particular morning. In other words, nothing shady had happened. Nobody double-dipped his account. It was literally just his own payment processing like normal. I explained that to him, carefully walking him through the timeline, but he just couldn't seem to accept it. He was convinced it was something else, and all I could do was try not to roll my eyes so hard that early in the day. Eventually, he hung up, probably still not believing me, and I just sat there thinking, if this is the way the day is starting, it's gonna be a long one. And I wasn't wrong. Not too long after, my second call came through. This customer needed a payoff statement. That part was fine. I could do that. But the issue was that he didn't understand how the process actually worked. I explained it right from the beginning. I can't take a payment over the phone. That's not how it works with us. It has to be done through a wire transfer. I even told him step by step, I'd generate the payoff statement for him. Then he'd take that document to the bank, and the bank would wire the payment on his behalf. He seemed to follow along. I got the payoff statement generated and sent over. Then, a couple of hours later, he called back. This time, he sounded confused and a little annoyed. He said, "I'm not seeing a place on the website to make a payment under the document center." I had to bite back a laugh. I reminded him, again, that the payoff statement isn't a place to click and pay online. It's not like a shopping cart where you just check out. It's literally just the information he takes to the bank to wire the funds. I had told him this at the very beginning of our conversation, word for word. There was this pause, and then he just said, "Thank you, bye," and hung up quickly, like he didn't want to hear anything else. Meanwhile, I'm sitting there thinking, man, if you had just listened to the words coming out of my mouth the first time, this whole thing would have been a lot faster, and you wouldn't have ended up looking so clueless. By that point, I was already drained, and it wasn't even 7 in the morning yet. 2 calls, back to back, both of them way more frustrating than they needed to be, all because people don't listen. That's the end of this story. It's kind of wild how people will call customer service, get clear instructions, and still decide to make up their own version of events. The part that gets me is that both of those situations were so avoidable. Listening for an extra 30 seconds could have saved everyone time, but I guess that's just part of working those kinds of jobs. You deal with folks who refuse to hear you out. Makes me glad I'm not taking calls at 5:30 in the morning. This next story is about a man whose playful joke at the checkout counter backfired when an older worker took it way more seriously than he expected. So this technically happened just last night. I'm 48 and I'd gone to Costco to do a regular shopping trip. Nothing unusual, just the usual haul of bulk items and household stuff. In the mix of everything, I had grabbed a big pack of their generic version of Dayquil and NyQuil. I wasn't thinking much of it. It's flu season. I like to keep it stocked at home, simple as that. Now, the checkout area at Costco is always a bit of a gamble. You either get stuck in the long lines with cashiers, or you luck out and find an opening at the self-scanners. This time, the self-checkouts were wide open, so I went that route. While I was there, one of the employees working the area, an older woman who looked like she might have been in her mid to late 60s, came over to help me scan the bigger items that didn't fit well on the counter. We had a nice little small talk, just polite, easy conversation while she did her thing. I got through scanning everything and hit the finish button, ready to pay and get out of there. But suddenly, this error message popped up on the screen. One of my items required age verification. That caught me off guard because, as far as I remembered, I hadn't bought any alcohol. I kind of raised my eyebrows at the screen like, what? The older lady came back over to see what was going on, and she picked up the pack of NyQuil. She smiled a little and explained, "It's this. People figured out how to get high off of it, so we need to verify the age." Now, here's where I made my mistake. Without thinking too hard, I grinned and said in this cheerful, joking tone, "Oh, that sounds fun." To me, it was just a lighthearted throwaway joke. I said it in the same way you might joke about chocolate cake being illegal or something silly like that. Nothing serious, nothing meant to raise eyebrows. But the second the words left my mouth, I realized she was not the kind of person who'd find it funny. Her expression changed instantly. She got stiff, her face tightened up, and without even hesitating, she reached over to the screen and removed the NyQuil from my purchase entirely. Then, in a voice that was way louder and sharper than before, she said, "You can't buy this." I was caught completely off guard. I blinked at her and said, "Wait, what? Why not?" I was joking, but she wasn't having it. She crossed her arms and said firmly, "That is not something you joke about." She looked so upset, like I had just confessed to a crime or something. Before I could say anything else, she literally walked away, carrying the pack of NyQuil with her. I stood there for a second, stunned, before realizing there was no point arguing. She had made up her mind, and the last thing I wanted was to cause a scene in Costco over cough medicine, so I sighed, accepted the loss, paid for the rest of my haul, and left. On the drive home, I kept replaying the whole thing in my head. It was so bizarre how quickly things had escalated. One second, I was making what I thought was an innocent little joke, and the next, my medicine had been confiscated and I'd been treated like some reckless teenager. Looking back now, I can kind of laugh at the ridiculousness of it, but in the moment, yeah, I definitely took the dumb L and just got out of there. That's where the story ends. This one really shows how humor doesn't always land the way you expect. The guy thought he was being playful, but to her it was dead serious. I guess some people just don't do jokes about that stuff at all. What makes it kind of funny though is how extreme her reaction was. She straight up took the medicine away like she was busting him in some undercover sting. Definitely a reminder that not every joke hits the way you want it to. This next story is about a man caught between family pressure and his own sanity after his elderly neighbor started relying on him like a full-time caretaker. I'm 42, and for the last 15 years, I've lived next door to a man named Bill, who's 87 years old. When I first moved in, Bill was just another neighbor. He'd wave from his porch, occasionally make small talk, nothing out of the ordinary. For the longest time, that was the extent of our relationship. But about 2 years ago, things started to change. Bill began asking for small favors here and there. At first it was nothing major. Picking up a few groceries, giving him a ride to the pharmacy, helping him screw in a light bulb. I didn't mind at all. He was an older guy, and I figured lending a hand once in a while was just being a decent neighbor. And honestly, back then it felt good to help. But over time, those little favors snowballed into bigger ones. Now it feels like Bill doesn't see me as his neighbor anymore. He sees me as his personal caretaker. He calls at random hours, not for emergencies, but for things that don't need to be handled right away. I remember one day he rang me up in the middle of a work meeting just because he couldn't figure out his thermostat. Not because the heat was broken, not because there was danger, just because the buttons confused him. I had to explain to him that I can't always drop what I'm doing to come over immediately. And instead of understanding, he exploded at me. He said younger people like me owe the elderly our time. He actually framed it like I was in debt to him just because he's old. That's when the drama really started to unfold. When I vented to my family, it split them in half. My mom is 70, and she immediately took Bill's side. She told me I should keep helping because one day I'll be old too, and I'll hope someone will do the same for me. My sister piled on, saying I was cruel for even thinking of setting boundaries. She actually told me flat out that I was being heartless, but not everyone agreed. My brother, who's 44, told me I was right to draw the line. He said Bill is manipulative and knows exactly what he's doing by playing the helpless old man card. My wife was furious too, but not at Bill, at me. She pointed out how often I've missed dinners and family time just to go reset Bill's router or move his furniture. She's not wrong. There have been multiple nights where she's had a hot meal waiting, and I've had to call her from Bill's place saying, "Sorry, I'll be late again." Then there's my cousin, who somehow thinks I'm the selfish one in all of this. He actually said, "You don't have kids at home anymore, so you have more free time than the rest of us. You should help him." The thing is, I'm a nurse. My shifts are draining enough without playing handyman on my off hours. Free time isn't something I have in abundance. To make it worse, my friend, who's about my age, tried to give me a more practical solution. He suggested I call social services or a senior support group to get Bill the kind of help he needs. He was blunt. He said this shouldn't be my responsibility. And deep down, I know he's right. But even knowing that, it doesn't make things easier. Now I feel like it's me against half my family, plus Bill. My mom and my sister keep repeating that I'm abandoning an old man who has no one else. My cousin guilt trips me every time we talk. Meanwhile, my wife and my brother are firmly on my side, reminding me that Bill is taking advantage of my kindness. And so, I'm stuck. If I keep helping, I'm drained. I'm missing family moments, and my marriage is taking hits. If I stop, I'm branded the cold neighbor who turned his back on an old man. I feel trapped in this no-win situation. No matter what I choose, it feels like I'm letting someone down. That's the end of this story. This one hits hard because it's such a lose-lose setup. You can tell the guy genuinely wanted to do the right thing, but sometimes people start expecting way more than you can give. What stood out to me most was how split his family was. It's wild how quickly people pick sides when they're not the ones sacrificing their own time. Honestly, it sounds exhausting, and I don't blame him for wanting out. That kind of pressure from all directions would wear anyone down. Anyways, that's all the stories I have for you today, and I hope it was a chill listen. If you had a good time, dropping a like and hitting that subscribe button really helps me out. And as always, thanks for hanging out, and I'll see you in the next one.